Hello, my name is Mr Thomsen. I am an international educator. I have been teaching for 26 years. I have taught in 2 US states and 4 other countries. I have taught in Slovakia, Barcelona, Spain, Chennai, India, and now currently in Zagreb, Croatia. Now, I'm not your usual teacher. I have done all sorts of different things. I'm an ex-naval nuclear mechanic. I worked on Trident submarines for 6 years during the Cold War. In 1989, my last patrol, the wall came down in Berlin. Now, I'm also a national park ranger in the summers and have been one for 5 seasons at Mount Rainier National Park in Washington State. This is really important for me because I like bringing those experiences into my classroom. I have many experiences from work. I've been working since I was a very small child, and I understand the difficulties of growing up in hardship and in privilege from my teaching internationally. My education, I have a bachelor's in education, science education in earth science with a minor in physics. I have a master's degree in industrial vocational technical education. I'm a technology integrator, so I teach teachers all the time on how to use technologies and equipment. I also use all sorts of things in my experience level. Since I teach earth science often, I will talk about working and growing up on Mount St. Helens in Washington State, an active volcano, and working as a national park ranger, training people about the hazards of volcanoes up on Mount Rainier, or glacial travel, or native ecology, and working in the national parks. I also have been a guide on whale boats in the Puget Sound, teaching people about the natural history of the Puget Sound and the whales. I'm very, very invested in STEM and STEAM. Science, technology, engineering, art, and math is my life. I have been coaching Science Olympiad in the US. I coached it for 15 years. I was on the state board in Washington for 5 years. I helped host invitational contests for about 11 years of my teaching career. There are 23 different events in middle school and 23 in high school. That means there were 46 different events in every discipline in science. Now, educationally, I have taught everything from 6th grade through university level IB DP program. Now, IB is the International Baccalaureate. I've taught IB DP biology, chemistry, and math. I'm certified also in physics. My experiences are vast. My students love my class. I do everything I can to reach out to them and get them involved in seeing myself as a lifetime learner, modeling that to them. They can teach me every day, and they have for my entire career. I love what I do. I feel very privileged my job is my calling. It's not a job. I love what I do, and my students love my class, and it's always been that way. And I'm still in touch with students for 25 years after teaching them. They reach out to me all the time. I hope you are excited to see me, and I'm excited to see what I can bring to your schools. Thank you for your time. How do I ensure access to my content? Because of my tech background and my technical training and my ability to see when kids aren't getting it, I provide scaffolded work. I provide outreach and extension work. I provide mediation work, depending on what the student's needs are. I am very organized in that type of thing. I provide a lot of different tools, from web pages to teaching students how to use Google Docs, teaching them about videoing. I teach them all sorts of different ways. I've had students that are blind be able to use microscopes by video broadcasting it to the screen and having them stand next to the screen. They weren't purely blind, but they were legally blind, and they couldn't look through a microscope and see an organism. But if you broadcast it onto the screen, they can. Providing opportunities for students to have success is how I ensure that they will do it. I also am very demanding, and I expect 100% completion of every project by every student. and I will do everything in my power to empower them to find that success. It may be a week or two late, but I will be on them and help them become successful. I don't take failure from my students. My students have to participate, and I will do everything I can to help them participate. That means reaching out to parents if I have to, because they're middle and high school level students. Often I work with them and they come to me after school and between classes and before school. And they know that they can count on me to respond to their emails and questions. And that's how I ensure access. The scaffolding is important, especially if the students are language learners. I've had lots of language learners. All of my, well, 70 to 80% of my students internationally have been language learners. They speak anywhere from 2 to 3 languages to 5 languages. It's not unheard of. My students, one of the things that I like to do, especially if I have a strongly one culture, in Slovakia, I had a lot of Korean students, and I don't mind them speaking their own language if it's on topic. And how to ensure this is you sit them boy, girl, boy, girl. And if you sit them boy, girl, you will not have the discipline problems generally. And you will also see the boys and the girls talking on topic and not doing the socializing like they tend to do, particularly in middle school. High school, it's a little bit harder, but you can still do that. And that's one of the other ways I ensure access. Also, if a student is not challenged by my course, I will find ways to draw them into the things they are challenged by and are interested in every topic in science, be it physics, chemistry, biology, environmental science, earth science. My background is vast when it comes to what I've experienced in my life. My fundamental principle of management in my classroom is mutual respect. Love and logic is kind of a cornerstone, giving students choices, having buy-in through humor and having fun with the kids realizing that if I have fun, they can have fun. If I'm not having fun, you're not having fun. Chunking the materials so it isn't overwhelming all one thing at one time for a long period of time. Often when people have an hour-and-a-half block, if they're doing block scheduling, students need to have 2 to 3 activities to break up the monotony or the attention span, particularly in middle schoolers. Students want to be successful and they want to feel safe. And you have to provide that opportunity for them to feel safe and to buy into what you believe in. As long as there's mutual respect, that can occur. If there's no mutual respect, you'll never get anywhere with your students. My students are my students. I feel very in touch with my students. I want to know what makes them interested in class. I want to know if there's something at home bothering them that I can at least ensure that they will be safe in my room and feel safety here, because safety in your classroom is the cornerstone of your learning environment. I think that's pretty much it for me for management systems. But giving them choices, if a kid misbehaves, not making it so punitive that they feel oppressed by it. It's a choice, and they've got to learn how to make good choices. And you got to give them the opportunity to make better choices and feel that it's their choice to make a good choice. And that's basically my management strategy, buy-in by my students. I survey my students at the end of the year, and between 80 and 90% of them say that I teach to their learning styles, which makes my job so much easier because I have their buy-in. And I have surveyed my students for the last 7 years, and anywhere from 80 to 95% have said that I teach to their learning style. Thank you. Assessment. Assessment's big. There are so many different ways to assess through labs, through projects, through videos, through dance, through modeling, through testing, through questioning. All of those are in my tool bag for assessing my students. My wife is always dumbfounded how much I know about my students and where they are in their learning. When Google Documents came along and gave me the opportunity to look into the kids' document and their thinking, it gave me a great insight in how they write and how they communicate. And I leave them little comments within their documents as I'm grading them. So they get constant feedback. They get constant feedback in the classroom all the time on what they're doing, how they should be doing it, how to organize their drives, how to organize their information, how to be a better learner and understand that learning is a spectrum and how we learn is all individual. But we also have certain things that we can learn from each other that will help us. They are teaching me every single day, and I am assessing them every single day, whether it's written formally, whether it's just observational, whether it's the kid's not checked in today, and why isn't he checked in? Figure that out. You've got to understand there are so many different ways to assess. Another one of the things that I want to assess, and I use in my assessment, is map scoring sometimes, particularly the math and the communications scores. I look at state testing. I've in the state of Washington, I helped grade the state test. That was really informative in the IB when I taught the International Baccalaureate. I went to trainings on that. My last year in IB biology with my DP program, where only 5% of the students get a 7. I had 2 get a 7 out of 3, which is pretty remarkable. And the other one got a 5. And that's a standardized test that they have to prepare for. Well, if you know what the test is like, you can prepare them more effectively for the test. But I also want to teach to their interests, because there's a balance between interests and what is required of the state. I want the students to be able to reach their dreams or find some dreams that they never knew they had. And assessment is one of the tools I use to help them do that. If a student is giving me the basic, I will always raise the bar. Now, each time I raise that bar, they like it actually. They like me being aware of where they are in their learning. And they want to please me, which is really powerful. I get so lucky that my students want to please me and reach for things that they thought they could do. In an international science fair this year, every one of my students completed their project for the 5th year consecutively. That means that they did a journal, a daily journal. They developed a web page. They made a video. They made a template for the video. They built a model of their project, and they wrote a final report. That's 6 things. That's 11-year-old to 13-year-olds with 100% completion. I did a project in America where I had 105 out of 114 completions, where the students built and designed a house, cost estimated it, and built a model. I'd say the most important thing is every student can learn. And that means from the most gifted to the most challenged. My class has been historically the place that troubled students succeed. In America, that was always true. When there were a troubled student, my class would get them, and the kids would find success. We had students that were labeled that ended up performing exceptionally well for my science teams. I want my students to know that they're going to be able to learn, and I will not give up on them until they do start showing progress. And their progress is individual. It may be not what other people expect of them, but I just keep raising the bar and raising the bar and helping them to challenge themselves. If you get that kind of buy-in from your students as a teacher, your job is already done. Then your job is then to keep instilling in them new ways to look, giving them new opportunities for learning, giving them new opportunities for discovery and finding and communicating and expressing themselves, because students need different ways to express themselves. And I've used a very wide swath of different ways to communicate. The artists find me with photography. The builders and the hands-on kids find it through their models and constructions and for science class. The communicators do it through videoing and sharing and presenting. My students present all the time, and being a role model to younger kids is one of the most important things for inclusion and diversity. They get to instill in the younger grades what it's possible for them to do as educating each other. When they start realizing they're teaching each other all the time, they start raising their own bars. My class has been incredibly diverse. In international community, I have taught incredibly gifted students. In America, I taught incredibly impoverished students. In my schools, we had 25% going on to university at the two schools I spent the longest time with. In 6 years, it went from 25% to 85%. Almost all the students that I've taught remember my class, even though it's a middle school level class. They say that my class is very memorable to them. And it's the memorable because of the communication that they feel included. They have to accept each other. One of the most interesting diversity things that ever happened was we had a student who was genetically ambiguous on gender. That student went from 8th grade to 9th grade and switched genders. Every kid in that school supported that student's choice to do that. And it just made me proud as a teacher to realize that they were able to be accepting of the diversity and the challenges that student was going through. And being a role model to that is what teaching is all about.